All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. On the schedule today, it listed both myself and Nate as being presenters, but I had signed him up against his will, and so earlier today I offered to let him not do this presentation with me, and he seemed to like that idea. But I do want to make sure he gets credit for writing this entire presentation. This was something that we came up with just before Bad Camp last fall, where he's like, oh, it's been a really long time since Backdrop's been out. Maybe we should write a slide deck that just shows all of the stuff that we've accomplished over that time. And we gave it there. People really loved it. And then people were requesting this talk more than our normal talks that we do at Drupal camps after that. So we're like, oh, I guess that was a good idea. We should do that more. So he did a really great job putting together most of these slides, and there's cool animations and stuff that I don't know how to do. So credit to him for figuring that out. My name, I think most of you know me already, is Jen Lampton. I'm one of the co-founders of Backdrop. I spend most of my time these days working on Backdrop sites, which I find really rewarding. I do still do a handful of Drupal 7 and unfortunately some Drupal 8, but that's life. Anyway, I'm just here to talk to you about what I love about what we've done with Backdrop. So today, Backdrop is 5.5 years old. It was released, well, I'll get to that. We have 14 versions have come out since we first released, and they have all come out on time, which is really exciting, especially coming from the world of Drupal, where things were never ready until they were ready. Now we've been switched to this world where everything has a due date and everything has a release date, and we've had to stick to it, and it's been a little hard, but we've got it done. Okay, so history. Oh, that's 14 versions ago, actually. But 5 years ago, we forked Drupal 8, and it happened shortly after Twin Cities Drupal Camp. We were here talking to people about how they felt about forking Drupal, and everybody's like, oh, that's crazy, nobody would do that, that's just, it's way too much work, we'll just figure out how to fix the thing we have. But after that, Nate had gone home and he'd been working on a particular patch to get CK Editor into core, and he got it ready, and it was marked ready to be committed. And in the time between it was marked ready to be committed and when it got committed, something changed so fundamentally in how Drupal 8 modules were written that this core module that was ready had to be entirely rewritten to match the new standards. And that point, it kind of clicked in Nate. He's like, oh, I get it. I understand the amount of change where you have something that's done, but then it's not done because it has to be redone to match some new standards. And he runs a website called webform.com that was his way to make money off of maintaining the webform contrib module. It's a Drupal 7 platform. It's like a SurveyMonkey competitor, but it's all open source, so you can download your data. You can also download a copy of the website and just fire it up, and now you have your own copy of all of your web forms in a way that you can use them without needing to be locked into something like SurveyMonkey. So he was like, it's like SurveyMonkey with freedom. And then he looked at the changes that were coming in Drupal 8, and he was like, oh my gosh, if I have to upgrade my own website to Drupal 8, the amount of time it's going to take me to do that makes it completely cost prohibitive to run software as a service on Drupal anymore, because he's spending so much time maintaining his own software, it's not making him any money. Now, the whole point was to make him money. So at that point, he's like, okay, I think Drupal's doing it wrong. We're going to go do it the way that I want to do it. And so on September 10th, we created a Nate created a GitHub repository and started working on it. And everybody noticed. He didn't think anyone would notice that he'd forked it right away. Everybody noticed, and they started making a whole bunch of noise online. We're like, oh my God, Nate forked the project. But then he was like, oh, maybe I should tell people why we forked it. And so 2 days later, he published the manifesto. This, by the way, is not recommended, because if you're scrambling together to put something, trying to justify yourself, you never get your language right. You end up saying things that you wish you hadn't said, and sometimes people take it the wrong way. So we had this manifesto website. It was trying to say, don't panic, everybody. This is just going to be another alternative. But he ended up putting a whole bunch of charts and graphs in it about how Drupal 8 was really different, and how it was going to be slower, and all of the stuff he was really worried about as a performance engineer. And everybody who was working on Drupal 8 pointed out fairly, it's not done yet. You can't really compare something that's in the middle of its phase to what you think it's going to be in the future. And so we did eventually change the language. But the points we were trying to make is that Backdrop is here to serve the existing Drupal audience, the people like Nate's website, webform.com, who didn't want to spend a whole bunch of money and time reinvesting in something they'd already built that they felt was done and they're happy with the way it was. He also was hoping it would sort of fill the lower end of the market, where he saw Drupal 8 was moving upstream and he thought that was good, but he was worried about small-scale Drupal. The small businesses, the people who are running their own websites and maybe aren't developers but know how to click together a Drupal site. And he was hoping that we could create a product that would say, okay, Drupal 8's got the high end covered, let's take care of the little people. He also wanted to focus on knowing that it was going to be the little people we were taking care of. What do they need most? It's not solid APIs and the ability to create a headless CMS. It's tools they can use and understand without needing to consult documentation. So trying to create a product for end users rather than a product for developers. He wanted to move to a different release cycle so that it wouldn't be 5+ years between each version. And he wanted anyone who wanted to do this with him to join him on GitHub. So we started. Come April 1st, 2014, backdropcms.org, our website was first published. Backdrop wasn't out yet. This was 2014, so we built it on Drupal 7. And this was our answer to fixing the manifesto. We're like, let's say the things we need to say in the right language, now that we have time to think about it slowly, and make the points we want to make without pointing at Drupal 8 and saying, we don't want that. Instead, we want to say, let's say what we do want. Let's say what our principles are, what we stand for, and ignore what's going on in the Drupal world and focus on our product. Shortly after that, on May 27th, we released our API website so everybody could see our code base, so they could see the differences between Drupal 7, Backdrop, and Drupal 8. And that also was built on Drupal 7 because Backdrop didn't exist yet. That summer, we hired a couple of different people to make us a logo and a mascot. The logo we thought would be good because we've now got a bunch of websites and we're telling people about things and we don't have any imagery to go with it. And the mascot we thought was really important because the Drupal community has the Drupal drop, and we thought that that was something that gave it a lot of character, and people were really passionate about doing fun things with that, and we wanted people to have something fun to play with in our community too. So we came up with Drag and Drop, our lap dragon. All right, on January 15th, 2015, we released Backdrop 1.0. So it was 15 months of development between when we decided to fork and when we released, so slightly over a year. And we were kind of shooting for like any time before Drupal 8 comes out would be fine. But we got to a point where we're like, this is good. We got all the things we really wanted in it. And there isn't anything that we can't do during the 1.x cycle. We looked at our wish list and we're like, what do we want to do? And we're like, oh, well, we can just add that later. That's not going to be an API change. So we changed all the APIs we wanted to change. And then we released we were ready in December, and we're like, should we release January 1st? And one of our community members like, January 1st is a terrible date. Everybody's going to be, showing up late to work from having partied really hard the night before, or recovering from having a week off of vacation, and everyone's going to miss the fact that you made an announcement. So let's push it a week and release it on January 15th, which we did. But we didn't realize at the time that January 15th was Drupal's birthday as well. So now Backdrop and Drupal share a birthday. I thought that was really great the first time. I'm like, oh, it's like the brothers are like born on the same day. Yeah, it was not intentional that we did that. So Backdrop 1.0 contained a Drupal compatibility layer. And this was so that anyone who wanted to drop in a module from Drupal would be able to get it running as fast as possible. So hopefully everything we put in the compatibility layer would still work. But what it does now is and we added this later, but it adds a watchdog log so that if you are trying to port a module from one system to the other, if you use something that's been deprecated or renamed, it'll say, hey, by the way, you should update your module to change this name. So we're trying to make it easier on people who are running contrib software. Backdrop 1.0 also included a new layout system, and this is probably one of the biggest API changes in Backdrop. We wanted to fundamentally change the way a page was structured and assembled so that themes wouldn't be in charge of your regions, so you could change your themes without breaking your site. And we wanted to give people a sort of a drag and drop panels-like interface for placing all sorts of kinds of stuff wherever they wanted on their site. Backdrop 1 included some of the most popular contrib modules from Drupal 7, including views. We put in a global dialog system. This is something that Nate worked on in Drupal 8, and so he felt very passionately that it needed to be in Backdrop as well. We put in a configuration management system, and this is the other largest API change, and this was so that you can store your configuration in files as opposed to your content in the database. And this was the one thing that we thought we couldn't release a Drupal 8 competitor without, because everybody's going to love configuration management in Drupal 8. We have to have that in Backdrop as well. All right, so less than 2 months later, we were able to update both backdropcms.org and api.backdropcms.org, which were Drupal 7 sites, to Backdrop. And that was something that we wanted to make a point of, as being like, look, the whole point of Backdrop is that it's easy to update your Drupal 7 sites, so we're going to do that as soon as we can with our own properties. So we did backdropcms.org first, and then we're like, well, we have this other Drupal 7 site, and then we updated the API site. And then May 15th, our first next deadline, we released Backdrop 1.1. 1.1 contained a new administration theme with a focus on user experience. It also added some more of the most popular Drupal 7 contrib modules like token and path auto. Neither of these are in Drupal 8 yet. I'm not sure if they're planning to be or not, but it was something that was pretty easy to add after the fact because they were already modules. On September 15th, we released Backdrop 1.2, and that included a whole bunch of attention paid to what it's like to interact with the administration interface on your phone. So this is where we made sure that everything worked responsively, and Wes put in a bunch of really cool CSS tricks in order to make them look really nice as accordions and stuff too. We also added the CK editor module. This is something Nate worked really hard to get into Drupal 8, so we also thought it was really important we get into Backdrop. And then we put in some more of the most popular Drupal modules like link, email, and date. Drupal 8 has comparable alternatives to these, although they aren't exactly the same. But we did just take the Drupal 7 module and put it in core. And what Drupal 8 did is sort of reimagine how a link module might work in a Drupal 8 world, and they put in something called URL instead. That was a simplified version. But because we were focused on making sure that upgrade path went really well, we couldn't put in a simplified version because people would lose data or functionality if we did. So again, it was sort of to say, like, we're doing the same things, but our principles are teaching us to do them differently. Backdrop 1.2 also included, or is the first release that used our packager. So this is, Drupal.org has a packager. When you release a module, it'll package up a nice little tarball for you and be like, here's your module. We didn't have that yet until Backdrop 1.2 because we were using GitHub, but we did figure out how to use the GitHub hook system to do the same thing for Backdrop. So now when you do a Backdrop release, it'll also package up the project for you and say, here's your nice little zip file, in case for Backdrop. Backdrop 1.3 was our first user experience release. And this happened because we had a bunch of really hard features we wanted to add and we didn't get them done. And so this was also our first point of being like, look, we have a due date, we've got to ship it, so we're just going to ship it with what we have. And what we had was a whole bunch of little tiny fixes because those were the easy ones to get done and they'd gotten done really fast. So it was a little improvement to every user interface all over core. And we ended up calling it a user experience release, and we decided we would have future user experience only releases too because it felt like it made such a huge difference in using the product. So one of the things we improved in 1.3 as well as what the site looked like is its performance. And this is a page we took from Varnish 4, where when you request an old copy of a page, what Drupal will do is say, hold on a minute, and then it'll go get you a new copy while you're waiting, and then it'll deliver it to you. So there's every now and then a really slow page load. This is what we call the slow first-time page load problem. And so like if you haven't visited your local development site for a while, and then you hit it, and you're like, well, geez, why isn't it loading? And then you refresh the page, it comes up immediately. So because that first time it's waiting for it to run cron and get you a fresh version of the page and all of that. So what we did in Backdrop is we introduced this background step, where if you request something old, it'll give you something old and then say, I know that's old, I'm going to make something new for the next person. So there's never a slow page load. It's always going to give the page fast, and then it'll refresh, and then the next page load will give you a new one. That's what Varnish 4 did, and we're like, that's a good idea. We should figure out how to do that with our software too. So now it runs cron in the background, and it does the page refreshes, and the cache clears in the background too. Backdrop 1.3 included one of my favorite usability improvements, our notification icon. So now if there is something wrong with your site that in Drupal would normally put a big red message across, but only on admin pages, we decided to have it put a notification in the admin bar so you could see on the front end of the site as well as on the back end of the site that there's something wrong. And I love it because as soon as we put it in, I realized how often I was missing those messages on the back end of my Drupal site. I'd log into Backdrop and be like, ooh, how long has that been there? Oh, I'm so sorry, site. So it's definitely been a real help for me personally, doing a lot of weird stuff to my Backdrop sites. Backup 1.3 also included the addition of moving permissions and URL pattern configuration from various places in the user interface to the page that you're on when you need them the most. And this also created a pattern that we've now adopted throughout the rest of core, where if you have permissions for something, you're going to put them both on the permissions page and wherever someone's configuring that something. So in this case, it's a content type, but that works for other systems in core as well. Backup 1.3 also included a transliteration module. This is something Drupal 8 had and we thought was important as well. Individual blocks for each field. So there's a field per block module or something like that in Drupal 7. And a whole bunch of other user experience improvements like custom text blocks, your ability to log in with your email address instead of just a username, responsive admin theme. These are not the vertical tabs, these are the ones across the top of the page, the horizontal tabs. All text fields can switch between text field and text area. So if you have a text field that's 255 characters and you want to put in more than one line, you don't have to scroll off the edge of your page. Improved interface for adding multiple values. So if you have more than one thing, you now get a remove button, you get an easier way to specify how many of them, so just kind of a little cleanup all over the place. On February 18th, we created a project management committee. So we've been out for over a year, and we realized we needed to officially adopt the policy we'd originally stated we wanted, which was Nate did not want to be a benevolent dictator for life. The two of us didn't want to be like in charge of anything. We wanted to be a more democratic process, and so we decided to use the model Apache uses, which is a project management committee where you have a small number of voting partners who are able to make decisions on behalf of the project as a whole. We picked the first, I think there were 4 people initially, and then as we've been working through, we find really great members of community, and we tend to nominate them and put them on the project management committee. We've got, I think, 2 applications, or not applications, there's discussion about adding 2 more people right now, but I won't tell you who they are yet. Backdrop 4 came out on May 15th that year. It included the project installer module. So this is also about creating a product for end users where you don't have to leave your website in order to install a new module. This was one of Angie Byron's favorite projects in Drupal land, and she tends to be very in line with all of our beliefs about what we want the project to do. And so every time she's like, I really want this, I go and look at what it is that she wants, and I'm like, yes, that's a fantastic idea, and then we're able to get it done in our world. We also included a new layout system. When we originally released layouts, we only included 4, and they were not using a fancy grid system like Bootstrap, and we knew that that would probably have to change in the future. When we put it in Bootstrap 4 was not out yet, so we were like early adopters, but it had been in development for 4 or 5 years, and so we knew it was fairly stable. People were using it in production, so it seems like a good model to adopt. Oh, we also left, this is our first practice of backwards compatibility from one core version to the next. So trying to figure out how not to break any sites that had been built using the old layouts, leaving them in core but making them hidden from anyone new who was installing this system was also kind of a fun experience for us. We're like, ooh, okay, we care about backwards compatibility. Let's make sure we can actually do that. All right, in Backdrop 1.4, we also included a couple of other popular Drupal contrib modules. Redirect became necessary because we'd already put in token and path auto, and menu block was something where our menu block system had worked differently than it did in Drupal 7, and we looked at what menu block the contrib module provided and went, oh, we can just add that to our current blocks in core, and we don't need to worry about having a menu block contrib module because we can do all the same stuff. So that went in. And we also added the ability to, if you're entering content from your phone, if you click on the upload button, you have the option of using your phone's camera and taking a picture immediately, which was something that we thought was pretty cool. Stole from WordPress, I think. Backdrop 1.5 came out on September 15th that year. It included a new front-end theme. So this is really exciting because Backdrop no longer looked like Drupal at 1.5. Before that, it looked very much the same. We also included a couple of other major features. I think this little snippet is showing the addition of the new hero block. So this was a block that spans all the way across the top. Usually it shows up on a home page. And we took screenshots of like 10 websites, and 9 of the 10 of them used them. And we're like, this is a 90% use case. We should provide this in core. Responsive drop-down menus. This is also something that was rather hard to achieve in Drupal 7. we figured we'd just bake something into core. So we looked at what the most popular responsive drop-down menus were at that point in time. We looked at how accessible they were. We looked at how touch-friendly they were. And we decided to use one called Smart Menus, which was the one that is most commonly used with Bootstrap. It had a pretty good active contrib community, and we really liked the way it worked. We also included a default homepage layout, so showing people a little bit more of what they can do with layouts out of the box. The hero block I mentioned, an existing content block, so you can place a block anywhere that just shows a node or user taxonomy term. And then we added emoji support in the database. So this was about the same time that Drupal 7 got emoji support, but we wanted to demonstrate how we would do the same thing differently for Backdrop. So we put in the same code change, but in Drupal 7, if you wanted to convert your site from using the old system to the new system, you had to run a drush script or write your own script to trigger something to make the change. And so in Backdrop, we just put in a button that said convert my site. And so you could do the update and it would say, hey, we now offer emoji support. Do you want this? Yes, no. And you hit yes, and then it showed a little progress bar and did the conversion. It's just the fact that our users are majority user interface button clickers, and the Drupal 7 community is majority command line drush users. We want to kind of separate, like, how do we do that for our people? Backdrop 1.6 came out January 15th, 2017. 2 years. Here we added most of the file entity module from Drupal 7. This was another one of those top contrib projects. And because files were not complete entities in early versions of Backdrop, it was also an interesting challenge to take the version of files that we had and merge it with the version of files that were most popular in Drupal 7 contrib and try and make that upgrade as smooth as possible. Next version of Backdrop, we're actually going to do some more on this, which I'll talk about later. We also added a hamburger menu because as soon as we put in a touch-friendly mobile responsive menu, we realized that everybody in the like at issue queues were saying, how do I put in a hamburger? And we're like, oh, every single person wants a hamburger. We should put that in core as well. So this is just a little toggle. It's 3 horizontal lines we like to call it in the hamburger menu. It's now a checkbox on any block. You can turn on a hamburger menu, whether it's your responsive drop-down menu or not. Backdrop 1.6 also includes entity view mode module. This allows you to create more display modes than just full and teaser, which is what you used to get out of the box in Drupal 7. You can now have a sidebar and a slideshow and a promotion or whatever it is. If you never use this, it doesn't really change much in how you'd interact with Backdrop, but if you do, it's there. On February 19th, we had a bunch of people clamoring for the ability to translate Backdrop into more languages, and they hated the fact that you had to go to Drupal.org and download a translation of Drupal 7 and then import it into your Backdrop site. So one of our amazing volunteers, Olaf from Germany, volunteered to create and maintain our localization site, and he's been doing a fantastic job on that. He approves, we get like new translators about once a week now, helping to just copy translations from Drupal 7, throw them into the Backdrop site, check and see how many strings are translated, and then fill in the holes of what's new and different in Backdrop. Just after that, on February 12th, Backdrop was forked. So this we actually thought was really great. John Franklin, the author of Silkscreen, is creating what he calls the press flow of Backdrop. So it's Backdrop, but specifically engineered for high-end sites. So in Drupal 7, Drupal 6 too, there was a press flow release that specifically targeted the needs of the high end when Drupal wasn't quite there yet. In Drupal 8 covers all of those needs, and so it doesn't need to have that fork anywhere. But because Backdrop is, again, focused on the smaller side of things, John Franklin wanted to run Backdrop on a much larger scale, and so he forked it and he left in some stuff like the database compatibility layer that we'd ripped out. He left in he's got the ability to store configuration in the database, so if you're using multiple web servers, it's a little easier to manage your configuration. So there's a bunch of stuff in there that he's maintaining specifically for his like high-end group of clients, which is pretty cool. And he's very active in Backdrop issue queues too. Anytime he does something for his project, he's like, hey, this is what I need in my community. I'm just going to leave a note here for you guys to consider. Something like configuration in the database was something that originally we were like, no, we don't want that, and then a year later we're like, it's okay, we can put it in. So, yeah, we're not going to put in the module that lets you do it, but we're going to put in an API change that'll allow that module to exist. So, Backdrop 1.7 came out May 15th, 2017. In that version, we redesigned the status report. This is something that I always thought was a little bit ugly in Drupal 7. Drupal 8 put in a nice, pretty version, so we wanted a prettier version as well. We also added a little bit of, I think what was called the advanced link module in Drupal 7, where now when you're adding a link, you can just start typing the title of any piece of content, and it'll do an autocomplete on your content and give you the ability to link to that without needing to like go and find the content and copy the link and paste it in and hope you didn't include the link to your dev site in your body field, because that would be a problem. We also allowed copy-paste uploads. This is something that I don't think exists in any version of Drupal yet. I looked for a contrib module that added it and didn't find one. If you know of one, let me know. But this is something WordPress has, where if you're like working in a Microsoft Word document, please don't do this, and copy the whole thing, including an image, and then you paste it into Backdrop. Your image will get pasted in and then uploaded to the server in the background. We also included a bunch of layout improvements. So we included a couple of features from a couple of contrib modules in Drupal 7. Views content module is the one that created content pane displays, and those pane displays had a bunch of different settings specifically for panels. So because in Backdrop our layout system is the same as panels, we wanted all of the same features that views and panels had when they work nicely together to work with views and layouts. So this gives you the ability to override the number of items that display in a view, the title, which fields are showing on a per placement basis. So you could create, like, here's my meetings. It includes the date, the location, and a PDF agenda. And you place that block on your homepage and you go, I don't need the agendas to show up on the homepage, and you exclude that field. So it's just a really fine-grained control of how you don't need to have different views displays to do that anymore. You can do it in your block configuration when you place it. We also added a whole bunch of other blocks, titles, tabs, messages, action links. So if you want these to appear in different places in your layout, you can place them. There's a module called Blockify that turns all of those elements into blocks in Drupal 7. We did the same thing, and they're also included in panels. So we did the same thing for Backdrop. Backdrop 1.8 came out on September 15th, and that was our second user experience release. So in this one, we redesigned the progress bar. Our old progress bar was like super bright green, and everyone would start loading and go, it's too much. And so we made it a pretty blue, and it's not animated in this photo, but it's this little barber pole thing when it's actually going, so we like it a lot. We also added color coding to our Git diff. So we copied the colors from GitHub. If you look at a diff on GitHub, it does this highlighting with red and green and shows you exactly what's changed. Our original version included all of the markup for that. It had span tags everywhere, but we didn't write any CSS for it. So this one, I was like, this is a great job for a front ender. All of the markup is there. You just have to color code it. And so we got one of our, I think it was like one of my summer interns or someone who just had a little bit of time, was like, oh, I can definitely do that. And they got, changes in Backdrop core in a matter of weeks, which was great. We also added an unpublished indicator. We wanted to make it clear to people which content was published and unpublished when they were looking at it from the front end. And that's in the theme, so you can override it if you don't like it in your own theme. We added icons. This is our first argument about whether we should use icons or not. They went into the administration overview page, which is not really a page very many people visit, but if you do, it's now prettier. And then we added screenshots to the project browser. So this is particularly for themes. If you want to see what your theme is going to look like, there's a screenshot usually uploaded to the theme, and so we wanted to make sure those display. We do have an outstanding issue to add this to layouts and modules as well. So if your module wanted to have screenshots, you can do that too, but we want to put in more than one, so you can have a slideshow of like, here's all of the interfaces the module provides, or here's all of the changes before and after, and so that's being a little slower. Backdrop 1.9 came out on January 15th, 2018, so Backdrop's now 3 years old. We included file replace ability for file entities. So initially we just turned the files into entities, but we didn't include any of the user interface features. 1.9, we gave you the ability to manage those files. You don't just see them in the user interface, you can now edit them, replace them, and this is the kind of thing where, if that agenda changes and it was linked on 5 pieces of content, you can go into the file, upload and replace it there, and you don't need to visit any of those 5 pieces of content. It's going to be updated across all of them. It's got that use count there that'll show you how many places that file's in use. This is also a view, so you can change it if you want something else there. May 15th, we released 110. 110 included comment closer module. This is something we stole from WordPress. Their comments are ability to close, and we had a Drupal module for it, so we put it in. We also included scheduled publishing. So if you want to create a blog post but not have to wake up tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. to publish it, you can go ahead and do that. I use this all the time on backtopcms.org. It's fantastic. You can also upload files inline. So where you used to be able to put an image into the middle of your body field, you can now upload a file and it'll put an icon and it'll link it in the same way. Menu items are translatable and blocks are translatable. So this is where Olaf came in and was like, you know what would make my life easier? I want to translate all these other things. And we're like, sure. Just started making anything he wanted translatable. Backdrop 111, released September 15th. That one included a new color module. So when we first put in Basis, it did not have color support, and part of that was because Wes looked at the old color module and went, what is this? I can't work with this, this is terrible. And we're like, that's fine, we'll do it later. And so we put in Basis without color support, and then Joseph came around, and he had a lot of experience working with color module in Drupal 7. He supports big multi-site platforms where people change colors of their themes. He's like, oh, I really need this. I'll work on improving the color module. He rewrote a whole bunch of the weird stuff in it. Now it uses like actual color fields. It used your browser's color pickers. And then he rewrote the preview too, so that now when you're looking in the preview, it's not a screenshot of what your site might look like that's been colorized. It's actually loaded your site running the new version of your theme showing those changes. So if you want to visit a particular page in your site and see what that looks like, you can navigate to it right in there and you can see what it looks like with the new colors. Backdrop 111 included a new image browser. So this is when you go to add an image somewhere, you can see the existing ones that are already there. Also, we put that content preview. So we originally deleted the preview button when we released Backdrop 1.0 because the preview in Drupal 7 was really broken. You only ever could preview something in your admin theme. And there's a whole bunch of contrib modules that tried to fix it, but the problem was core. And so we're like, well, we know this doesn't work, just rip it out. So we went in core and we ripped out anything that had to do with previews. And then in Backdrop 111, we're like, okay, let's write that the right way. And so we went back in and figured out, now that we have this fancy theme preview where you can see your whole site, let's just use that same thing here in the content preview option. So we put back the preview button. And this now also takes into account your layout. So if you want to preview what a piece of content looks like and all of its fields are all over the sidebars, you hit preview here and you'll see that fields all over the sidebars. So it's the entire page, not just your content. It also has the ability to change the size and the ability to change the view mode. So if you want to see what it looks like in that promo view mode or the sidebar view mode, you can switch and look at that right here too. Backdrop 111 also included hidden paths for content. So this was what was rabbit hole in Drupal 7. And this is because in Drupal 8, they made this decision that blocks became content and they became editable in the same way a node is editable, where you can have like translations and revisions and all of the fancy stuff that you really want for your blocks. In Backdrop, we went the other way and said, no, blocks are configuration. All it is 2 strings of text. But there's a use case there for like, I want to have a block that's content. And so our way of solving that is saying, well, we'll just give you a node that you can turn off its path, and now it's a block. And you can place that node using layouts and views and any other way that you would normally place a block. We're just going to give the ability to turn off that URL. So Rabbit Hole module in Drupal 7 gave you that same turn off the URL feature. We just took that and put it in core. So now you can use nodes as blocks instead of using blocks as content. We also improved the contact module. That was also another module that hadn't gotten any love for I don't know how long. We added client-side upload progress bars when you're doing things like uploading images. And we added the ability for Backdrop Core to update itself. So this was also about the same time as all of those terrible Drupal 7 and Backdrop security issues. And so as we were fixing those, we're like, wow, like if anyone hasn't made these updates, they're really going to be in trouble. Wouldn't it be great if Backdrop could update itself so that the people who are taking care of the sites didn't even need to know that there were security updates and they would remain secure? And so we started working on automatic updates. We decided automatic was really scary, and so we were going to scale back and be like, what about just updates? And so what we originally put in was just a button that you push, and Backdrop will replace itself with a newer version. In this version, Backdrop 111, we hid that button from view because we couldn't test it until it was in there, because it needed to be there in order to update itself. So we put it in and made it hidden. We're like, this is just for core developers to test. In the next version, we turned it on. So Backdrop 112. We turned on the ability for people to update their websites. So after we had a chance to practice updating from 110 to 111, we confirmed it didn't explode or destroy anyone's sites, and then we enabled the checkbox in the user interface, so now other people can update their own sites. We also added options element in core. So this is one of those things that really frustrated me in content entry in Drupal. If you had a multi-value text field that gave you a text area, it was like, separate everything with a pipe and put new items on a new line. And I'm like, this is a really bizarre syntax you have to ask people to do to put in data. What if we made a really nice, clean interface for entering that stuff? And there's a contrib module that did this, but only for web form component fields. It didn't do it for field module fields. And Nate, as the Web4 module maintainer, had like a to-do in his brain. Oh, and field module maintainer had a to-do in his brain. It was like, we should fix this for fields, but had never actually gotten around to it. And I was like, what if we did it for Backdrop? And so we had a bunch of people, I didn't even work on this until the very end. A bunch of people just kind of took that idea and ran with it. And so we got better entry of list text fields in core. We also added icons. Now that we've learned everybody loves icons, we put them into the administration bar. So as you navigate around core, your icons here will match the ones you see on the admin config page. And then we also included CSS grid. Since everybody thought it was really exciting. We had a couple of places in core where we were still using tables. Views was one of them. When you check the views grid display, it would give you an HTML table, and that was really hard to make responsive. And so since we wanted Backdrop to be compatible with phones everywhere, we thought we shouldn't by default give you something that we knew wasn't going to work on a phone. So now by default it gives you a CSS grid, and so in your CSS you can decide how that's supposed to collapse for smaller devices. They put in a contact block. There's also a contact block module for Drupal 7, but since we did all of the new work on our contact form, we wanted to make it easier for it to take a contact form and just throw it in your footer. That was also a pattern that's really common today, and so we wanted to make it easier for people to do that. We made translatable taxonomy terms. So again, Olaf being like, hello, I found something else I want to translate. So we put that in core, and then we had been working, I think this is issue number 37, so it's now 112, this is like 3 years of Backdrop development. We've been arguing over how to improve the modules page, and we had like, this is what I want from one person, this is what I want from another person, and everybody couldn't agree on like which one was better or whether they wanted all of them or some of them. And so what our consensus was, everybody agrees that you can't have only one grouping for a module. Like you might have a views content module. Does that go in the views grouping or the content grouping? So we made it so that now you can choose one and say, okay, views content goes in views, but I'm going to add a tag for content, and then when you search for content, it'll show up under both. So it's the ability to we have a search on the modules page to search and find what you want using whatever tags you think you might instinctively use. So just making that work better. Backdrop 113 came out May this year. This included a new dashboard module in core. So I was the author of a contrib module for Drupal 7 called Total Control. Really early in Drupal 7 development, some people asked me to work on the dashboard that went into Drupal 7 core. Oh, sorry, that was for Drupal 6. Drupal 7 core they asked me to work on, and I was like, this goes against everything I believe in. It's like rewriting the block system for one page, and it's rewriting all of these things that should be views and like hard-coded SQL queries. And I'm like, no, I can't help you. I will tell you why it's wrong, but I will not work on it. And at that point, they were like, we don't have time. It's January of 2009. Backdrop or Drupal is going to come out next month. We've got to get it done. Turns out it was like a year and a half before Drupal came out, and I would have had time to do it differently, but that I didn't know that at the time, so I just argued instead of getting anything done and felt really bad about it. But I took the module that worked for Drupal 6, ported to Drupal 7, and now it's in core for Backdrop. So we've got, because we have a fancy layout panels interface, we have the ability to do things in views in core. We have the ability to do things the way I wanted back before Drupal 7, but it did take us a while to get there. We also added a Save Draft module in core. So Save Draft was just something that included, I don't think this is in yet. I think this is on our to-do list. But all it does is it redoes the buttons at the very bottom of the form so that when you click the Save button, if you're saving a draft, it'll say Save Draft. And if you're going to publish it, it'll say Save and Publish. And if you're going to schedule it, it'll say Save and Schedule, so that you aren't accidentally publishing that content that you think might be draft or scheduled. To just make it a little easier on the user interface. The Save Draft module also removes those weird radio buttons from the vertical tab. So the only thing you see are those buttons in the bottom, like they're Save Draft, Save and Schedule, and when you click on them, it'll give you different options. So I don't think that's in right now. We've got a core pull request for it, so excuse it for being on the list. Also, so this is what I was doing at 3:14 p.m. So I was trying to refactor this page because we just released 113. So Field Form Monitors is also scheduled for 114. So this is a great example of, this is the stuff we wanted to get done. What we actually got done was dashboard module and a whole bunch of usability improvements. Telemetry module is also interesting. That's going to be coming soon. That is something that will help inform Backdrop core developers about what Backdrop sites in the real world are actually doing. So which modules do you have on? What version of PHP are you running? Are you using automatic or not automatic manual update process? And that will give us information that will help us inform the decisions we need to make about what Backdrop should do in the future. because right now we are listening to the voices of all the people who are super active in Backdraft, but we've also noticed we have this growing community of people who are not active. And so we need to find a way to better evaluate what it is that they need, because they're not telling us what they want. So we're just going to try and look at what it is they're doing and figure out maybe we should be focused more on scheduling if they're all scheduling stuff when we add features over there rather than working on something else. So there's no more for Backdraft 1.3. It's over. But that's what's on the list. All right, so what are we working on today? This will be a repeat. Okay, so fieldable file types. This is, we have files as entities from Drupal 7. The file entities are not yet fieldable, and that's something that I want to change in Backdraft. It is, you got to be a little careful with it because we have this upgrade path from Drupal 7 we're trying to support. My main motivator for this is I want to make that upgrade from anyone who's using fieldable files in Drupal 7 to fieldable files in Backdraft just work. And because our entities are very different in Backdraft than they were in Drupal core, they're also slightly different from how they were in Contrib in Drupal core. There's got to be a lot of backwards compatibility in there. So we've got the module ported, it's working. The user interface is a little kludgy. I didn't do the port, Doc Wilmot did that, he did a fantastic job. But now I want to make sure that the upgrade path is there and the user interface is better. We've also got some major security improvements coming. Just recently, the project management committee decided to add security as one of our core values. And so we've got a whole bunch of issues related to security that we're working on solving in Backdraft. So we'll be able to do a release that's like, here's our security release, here's our new core value, this is why this matters to us, and show that we've done stuff about it. And Doc Wilmot now is working on a fantastic new layout that is configurable, so you can add a row or add a column anywhere you want in it. And this is based a little bit on Drupal 7 had a flexible layout that you could build. Drupal 8 has something similar. I don't think it's called flexible anymore, but it's squishy. WordPress has something called Divi, which lets you also create and divide your pages into different regions, and it seems that everybody wants that. Doc Wilmot wrote this module for Backdraft a year and a half ago or something, and we'd sort of been ignoring it for a while. And now we're like, oh, hey, that idea you had a year and a half ago turns out really good idea. We really want it in core. So now he's working on that, which is really great. And we've got a bunch of new ideas too. In general, if anything doesn't make a release milestone, it gets bumped from the release milestone, and then the community has to decide as a whole whether they think that that's an important priority for us, because we thought it was a priority last time, but it didn't get in. Did it not get in because it was hard, or did it not get in because it shouldn't really be our priority? So there's some things that are like, we have a label in our queue that's tagged milestone candidate, and so one person will put the label on it, another person has to agree that that's a priority in order for it to be scheduled into a milestone. All right. So what are we going to do in the future? Whew. Well, as we've learned, we can add a lot of stuff into Backdraft without having to break APIs. So we're looking at what can we do for Backdraft 1.x. We know automatic core updates are near because we've got the manual updates working great. We've got a couple of security improvements we want to make to our updater before we make that automatic. We're going to put in package signing to make sure that when your site goes to update a new version, the version it downloads is the version we want it to download and not something someone else has injected in the middle that might be malicious and be like, you want to download something? Haha, do this instead. It'll be like, sorry, can't do that. It's not the right version. We want to put in a reference field module. So in Drupal 7 Contrib, there is a references module, which is a port of what was in CCK in Drupal 6. And there's an entity reference module, which uses the entity system in Drupal 7. And we didn't like the entity system in Drupal 7. It was not a match for Backdraft's core values. And so we cleaned it up and made a simpler entity system that's object-oriented, more like Drupal 8. But that means we need to figure out how to get entity reference, which is the most popular Drupal 7 solution, to have a version that works with Backdraft. And so we're working on something called reference, which will be the same as entity reference. It'll include an upgrade path from both entity reference and node reference, and probably the taxonomy term reference field that's in core. And so we're going to work on getting that in so that all of those upgrade paths will be smooth. We're also going to improve translation. Translation was something that Drupal 8 spent a really long time improving between Drupal 7 and Drupal 8, and their translation system is fantastic. Because we forked from a point so early in Drupal 8 development, we didn't get any of those improvements. We get the ability to like redo all of the translation stuff they've already done. So again, like measuring against our principles and our values, our translation system is going to be much simpler than what went into Drupal 8, but that does mean that we need to figure out like how to solve some of the same problems, like our configuration system that's also new needs to be translated. So we've already got, in the last version, API changes that'll support central configuration management. Now we need to figure out how to build a UI for it or make it easier for people to use. And of course, as we continue to move forward, we'll be looking at what are people who are running Backdrop, what are the problems they're facing, what are the things that make owning that Backdrop site expensive, and how can we decrease the burden, and what are the features that are really hot in the world right now, like this configurable layout thing, and make sure that we get comparable solutions in for Backdrop. Backdrop 2.x is a big mystery. So far, we've had such success with adding things into 1.x. We do not have a date in the future for 2.x. All we know is that it will be at least 2 years after the end of life of Drupal 7. So we're going to keep working on Backdrop 1.x being the next version of Drupal 7 until 2 years after Drupal 7, so that anyone who's on 7 can hit that end of life and continue to upgrade to Backdrop as easily as possible. When Backdrop 2.x does come out, our plan is to remove all of the functions that were marked as deprecated, but not remove the Drupal backwards compatibility layer. So if we have anything that's an API change that has a new API, the old version will get thrown out. But anything that's like a wrapper function around Drupal or something that added a like watchdog log to help developers update, that will probably remain at least until Backdrop 3. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible for anyone who's on Drupal 7 to make the jump to Backdrop without needing to worry about rewriting their contrib modules or custom modules or anything.
So that's not until November
2023.
2023.
Yeah, at least.
At least.
Yeah, but we'll see, because if we can keep adding features and security improvements and usability improvements and backwards compatibility into 1.x, maybe there's also been some crazy ideas about like dropping the, changing the numbers rather than being Backdrop 1.14, it'll just be Backdrop 14. Because if we never have to break APIs, it'll change. So that's not official. You did not hear that from me. Crazy idea just being thrown around.
Not canon.
We'll talk about it in 2023. All right, so these are our options for 2.x. Our primary one is, our plan is to remove deprecated functions from core. There's another option where if we supported both Backdrop 1 and Backdrop 2 modules at the same time, we could do the same sort of thing with helping people update from 1 to 2. That requires a lot of work in changing how core will handle different module versions, so there's a lot of resistance from core developers to try and do that. And then there's the normal traditional Drupal 7 style release where we could just say, next version comes out, we're breaking APIs. And that's what we're trying to avoid, because that's why we're here in the first place. So hopefully we'll just be able to remove everything that's deprecated and not break anything at all. Whew. So we have 10, oh wait, am I done?
We're 4 minutes over.
Oh man, I kept looking at the clock and being like, oh, I got like 15 minutes left. All right, well, no questions. But you can definitely come and talk to Nate or myself or Kevin or Tim or anyone else here who is a Backdrop enthusiast about anything you saw now. But anyway, we've been busy.
Thanks.
Thank you.